In this video, I'm going to show you how to program realistic kick drum for metal. This is something I think a lot of people mess up as far as making things sound realistic. I'm not going to waste your time. We're going to jump right into this. And in order to program a realistic kick drum, we have to first understand how does a realistic kick drum sound. So what I've pulled up is a actual performance from one of my songs. Let's just take a listen to how an actual drum performance sounds. There's no sample augmentation, there's no sample layering. This is just the drums. They're processed, but it's just a live drum performance. This is just the kick. Okay, so that's what we're working with. Bear with me, this project sometimes kind of freezes when you start zooming in. I have no idea what plugin is causing it, but I have to deal with it. So the kit that I'm using is the One Kit Wonder Metal by GGD. And I chose this in particular because it has individual samples for each bass drum pedal. There's two, of course, two different pedals, two different beaters. You get two different sounds. And that's just going to up the realism that much more. And to save time, I just did audio to MIDI for the kick drum to get us at a good starting point. So this is the audio to MIDI down here. I have no idea how your DAW works. My DAW, the velocities are down here. I think that's pretty standard. You can see that there is variation. A lot of it is subtle, but I think that's, really what makes the difference between a heavily processed fake kick sounds like versus, something a bit more realistic. So I want to go over here. If you don't pay attention to anything, this is probably the most important thing that you can grasp out of this entire video. When you're doing double kick, if you take a look at how the audio to MIDI works, or how the audio to MIDI turned out to be, every other kick hit, for the most part, is quieter than the other. And that is probably the left foot, but like the less dominant foot of the drummer. So just by simply making sure every other hit when it comes to double kick is quieter than the other, that's going to up the realism a lot. And with this kit in particular, we got the dominant hit, the less dominant hit. These were sampled differently. They were sampled but different feet, so more realism added to this. Let's just listen to how this sounds, just the kick at this section. Oh, let me solo. You can hear there's it's not robotic. There's a smidge of struggle in it. It's human. Let's compare that to the actual kick. Now, it's kind of hard to tell because there's a lot of cymbal bleed. I probably could have did a little bit better managing the cymbal bleed in this, but, I think I did this like a year ago. I've gotten a lot better. So, it's definitely, it's pretty similar as far as dynamics and the human aspect. So the audio to MIDI actually did a pretty good job. Typically, I would do this just manually. I would have, every other hit for the most part, just a little bit quieter than the other. Biggest takeaway. Now, this conversion, the audio to MIDI, did not work out the greatest. Because if you heard the actual bass drum, it gets louder here and more intense. So another thing to keep in mind, your double bass parts should be a little bit quieter than, I guess just like your standard, single pedal hits. They should be louder. So we're going to play this. Sounds a little weak here. So I would, I would grab all of these. Oh wait, do we got a double kick there? No. So we're going to grab all these. I would just bump them up pretty close to 127, or like the loudest hit pretty close to 127. Not quite there. I mean, you could. Nobody really hits at 127 pretty consistent, so let's see how this sounds. So that's better. Go back to the original, or the performed kick. You know what? Maybe we can actually take that a little bit further. The other thing too is, that the hits might need to be a little bit more even. Again, the audio to MIDI was kind of just a shortcut to get me at a good starting point. So let's bump this up. Even out the hits a little bit. Bring it back down. There we go. Oops. They were both playing. Yeah, that's better. Okay, let's take another look at another section. All right, so let's, I hopped over to the breakdown area. Let's hear how the kick sounds there. So, I guess the slower hits, you can really put them pretty close to 127 and make them fairly consistent. Let's see what the audio to MIDI did over here. These little hits down here, that's just picking up some cymbal bleed. I mean, the volume's not correct on this. They're definitely way too quiet. But the one thing that it did get right is they're pretty consistent hits. The slower, more impact hits, you can make those pretty consistent. I wouldn't worry too much about, individually editing them or individually making sure every other hit, sounds slightly different. What I would do actually, let's just, erase. Let me get rid of these. Okay, I had to remove some of the notes that were it picked up some of the snare notes because of the bleed from the microphone. So I just put everything to 127. And I'm doing that because this is an opportunity, or a realistic opportunity for the drummer to actually hit these notes really hard. However, if we want maximum realism, what I would do is I would humanize the velocities, like, sometimes it really depends, but like 10%. Again, you could probably get away with doing 120, 127 for this stuff, but And, the last thing that I want to cover would be the timing. You know, you can get into the nitty gritty with, manually timing everything or really getting in depth. I mean, when it comes to modern metal, and if you're using samples, I think you're better off just, Control A, humanize the timing. And I wouldn't, I really wouldn't go much past 10 milliseconds. Because for the most part, to my knowledge, you can't really hear much of a difference when something is 10 milliseconds off. But the reason why we're choosing 10 milliseconds is because if the drums are 10 milliseconds fast and the guitar is, say, like 10 milliseconds slower, there's going to be a reasonable amount of offset going on, not enough to distract the listener. If 10 milliseconds is a bit too tight, I mean, you can go to maybe 15. I wouldn't go much more past that. You could always, you can experiment. You can go 20 if you really wanted to. It really depends on you. And, as far as the start time, if I'm doing 10 milliseconds, I would do random. You can make the drummer late. Early, or you can make the drummer late. It might depend on ultimately what you're looking for. And maybe your guitar playing is all late. So you can make the drumming a little bit late, and that might work for you. That's it. The big takeaways from this video, I would say, is with the double kick, make sure every other hit is quieter than the other for the most part. And make sure your double kicks are quieter than your single harder hitting kicks, because that's how a real drummer plays. The slower, harder hitting kicks, try and add a little bit of randomization to the velocities, and overall, I would add just a subtle amount of, humanizing and randomization to the timing. Nothing too drastic. I'm sure most people are trying to do a modern sounding production. So let me know if you enjoyed this video, because I like making these and I can make more. And this might turn into a video series. So I'll see you next video. Failure with failure.